Hey guys, in today's lecture, we'll be dealing with structural grammar. So far, we discussed linguistics, the various branches of linguistics, and the various aspects of linguistic analysis. We discussed about traditional grammar and the fallacies of traditional grammar. And with structural grammar, we come to a grand finale to all these concepts related to grammar. The most influential school of linguistics from the early to mid 20th century was the one usually described as structural or descriptive, and it was associated chiefly with the name of American linguist Leonard Bloomfield and his followers. Bloomfield's monumental work, Language, which was published in 1933, is known as the Bible of the structuralist. It set an era of structuralism. The main thesis or the main argument of this school is that language has a structure. Language is composed of units or elements like phonemes, morphemes, etc., and it exists in sequence at different levels. The interrelationship between these units determine the overall structure of the language. Structural grammar was in fact a reaction against the notional grammar of the traditional kind, with its vagueness of notion and inexplicitness in the criteria of definition. Like the lack of explicitness, remember? They were against the use of meaning for the definitions or establishment of grammatical categories. The structuralists vehemently opposed the semantic criteria and focused more on the formal criteria. When defining grammatical categories. The basic assumption of structuralism may be summed up as follows. Linguistics is an autonomous scientific discipline. The linguist data, or corpus as we say, is a limited stock of utterances made by the native speakers, and he should analyze it to identify the linguistic units. The discovery procedure should be rigorously empirical, which means it should be based on experimentation, and scientific, and this led to a rejection of all data that was not directly observable or physically measurable. Consequently, meaning was banished from linguistic analysis and form was given too much importance. Now, the second point is the analysis of a language proceeds from the smallest unit to the smallest unit of the sound to the largest unit of sentence. Hence, analysis proceeds in order of phonology, morphology, and syntax to the neglect of semantics. So they focused mainly on phonology, morphology, and syntax that is at the level of phonemes, not speech sounds. They even you can omit phonetics in this part. They focused mainly on phonology, which is phonemes. At the level of phonetics, you are studying the speech sounds like p, b, t, how it is uttered. Like when you say p, it should be in the initial position. It should be aspirated. You need to puff out some air and then say p. And again, when you say b, p and b are uttered with your mouth in a closed manner. So this is analyzing the speech sounds at the level of phonetics. So we don't take phonetics as such in the analysis of language, but it starts with phonology, which means it starts with the arrangement of phonemes, like p, t. They combine together, the speech sounds p, t combine together to form pat. So we'll be analyzing the combination of speech sounds in phonology. Then it moves to the formation of words, how smallest meaningful units of language, morphemes, combine together to form words. Like in talk and talked, where talk and ed, which is also a grammatical morpheme, combine together to form talked. And then we analyze language at the level of a syntax or word order, that is at the level of phrases and sentences. So this is how the analysis of language proceeds, from the smallest unit of sound to the largest unit of sentence. So at some cases you can take phonetics, but the hierarchy goes like this: at the level of phonology, morphology, and syntax. To the neglect of semantics, which means that when you analyze language, you often neglect semantics. In a structural level, you neglect semantics or the meaning of words. So when you take it hierarchically, the topmost position belongs to sentence constructions. Sentence is the ultimate constituent. The sentence is the last or the major part of linguistic analysis. Now moving on to the next point, language is a system of systems. Again, using the same diagram, we can say that language is a system of systems. It is a totality made up of units or elements which are interrelated at various levels. Speech sounds combine to form phonemes, phonemes combine to form words, words combine to form phrases and sentences. So it is interrelated at various levels and is structured in specific ways. Now, when we learn about a language, we learn it at the level of the phonological component, that is at the level of the speech sounds and the phonemes. And then we learn it at the level of words, that is at the level of morphology, at the level of word formation. Then we learn it at the level of formation of sentences or the formation of phrases with the structures like SVO, subject, verb, object, or SVC, subject, verb, complement, etc. So it is a system of systems which is interrelated at various levels in a specific and structured way. Now, every language has got its own unique structure and its own unique systems. Hence, it should be studied in terms of its own internal structure. Now, every language has got its own unique structure. Like we saw in the case of Latin, there are inflections, and inflections determines the meaning. Whereas in the case of English, the syntax or the word order determines meaning. So for each language, there is a unique structure and there is a unique system, and language should be studied in terms of its own unique structure, and there is no universal grammar which is common to all languages. There is no such thing as a universal grammar which is common to all languages. Now, the next and the major point is that speech is primary. So there was a technical glitch. So this was the slide I wanted to show you. So speech is primary and writing is only secondary. Now, the traditional grammarians considered spoken form as inferior and as a corrupt version of language, since many spoken form existed in Britain. Like there was a Cockney dialect which they considered as inferior to the British RP. So they considered speech as inferior to writing. Whereas the structuralists gave primacy to speech. They considered speech as primary, because even in when you take the history of any language, speech came first. In the poo-poo theory and the bow-wow theory, we say that it is, speech came first by the imitation of natural calls, by imitating the calls of a bird, or by imitating the calls of an animal. Speech developed first in the case of human beings. So they gave importance to speech, that is, they observed speech patterns, they observed individual utterances, and then framed the language, rather than giving importance to writing of the great classical masters, or giving importance to writing. So when you give importance to writing, it is somewhat elitist, because you are not taking into consideration the many spoken variations. But when you give primacy to speech, you are giving importance to all the spoken variations that are there in a language. You are giving importance to all the dialects that are there in language, and you are carefully observing them. So they gave primacy to speech. So they considered speech as primary and writing is only secondary to the spoken form. And they never considered the spoken form as inferior or corrupt. And along these lines, they also stated that language varieties should be studied and described objectively. No variety should be regarded as superior or inferior to others. So language varieties should be studied and described objectively. You need to study and describe language varieties objectively, without any bias, without considering them as inferior. And no variety should be regarded as inferior or superior to others. So if a structural linguist analyzes a language like Malayalam, for that matter, he would consider the Thiruvananthapuram dialect as well as the Valluvanadan dialect, and he would study the variations and differences in that language, and he would frame language in such a way that he would account for all these variations as well. So he would be learning about the dialect, he would be learning about the kind of language that these authors wrote in or spoke in, and then they would be describing their grammar based on the language variations. So language varieties should be studied and described objectively, and no variety should be regarded as inferior or superior. So no variety should be regarded as superior to others. In the case of traditional grammarians, they considered RP, or the received pronunciation, as superior to all other dialects. But it was not the case with structuralists. They gave importance to all language varieties. Now, the next point is somewhat similar to what we learned in descriptive grammar. That is, the linguist should discover and describe the rules governing a language and not prescribe rules and norms. A linguist must discover a language. He must be able to describe the rules governing a language, and he should not be prescribing rules and norms. Like in your Renan Martin textbooks, or in your early grammar textbooks that you learned at elementary level, there you were prescribed a set of rules and you were forced to follow them. But a descriptive grammarian should describe why such an utterance is there, why the modal auxiliary is used in certain ways. He must be able to describe the rules rather than prescribe rules and norms. He must be able to observe the language, describe the rules of language rather than prescribe a set of rules governing the language, prescribe a set of rules and norms. I hope that it was clear. We discussed this point over and over in many of the previous lectures. Now, the seventh point is again of very, very importance. It should be, it is one of those major crux. It can be considered as a crux of structuralism. A language is an arbitrary system of articulated sounds employed by the human community for the purpose of communication. So, a language is an arbitrary system of articulated sounds. It is a random system. It is an arbitrary system. Language is a random system, or it's an arbitrary system of articulated sounds, of the produced sounds employed by human community for the purpose of communication. So they utter or they articulate certain sounds, and the sole purpose of uttering or articulating these sounds is for the purpose of communication. They need to communicate, and they use language as a medium for that, and they consider language as arbitrary. It is, any given utterance and any name that we give to a thing is arbitrary. The naming process itself is arbitrary. I'll elucidate it with the help of an example. See, this is a table, isn't it? So in English it is called table. In Malayalam it is called mesha. In French it's called la table. And in Hindi it is called talika. So the same thing, mesha, has got different names in different languages. So if you go to a place in which the majority of people speak Hindi, when you go there and say that, give me a table, or I want to purchase a table, they will be shocked. They won't know what you are speaking. They won't, because if they are not educated and if they don't know what, English well, then they might be confused. They don't know what table is. You need to say to them that mujhe ek talika chahiye. So then they will be able to understand that language. Then they will be able to understand that you need a talika or you need a table. Otherwise, you need to show them this picture. The second thing is that when you go to a place in which people speak only in Malayalam, and when there you go and say that, can you give me la table? Or in French, you say that la table, I need la table. They would, wonder. They don't know what la table is. They might know what a table, they if they know English, they might know what a table is. And what is table or table for them? Pardon me if I'm not pronouncing it correctly because I don't know French. But then again, table for them, they don't know what it is. They might, mistake it for, tabla or something, because they don't know what it is. So any thing that is named by us is named in a random manner. Language is arbitrary. It is not the same everywhere. It changes with geographical location, and it changes. It has got variations. So the same thing, table in English is called mesha in Malayalam, la table in French. La means the table, and then talika, which means in Hindi it is called talika in Hindi. Now there was a small correction in the slide. Language is arbitrary, not arbitrary. So language is arbitrary, which means that naming process itself is something which is done randomly. It is without any reason. It is done without any reason. It is done randomly. There is no one-to-one relationship between a thing and the word that is used to denote it. So there is no one-to-one relationship between a thing and a word that is used to denote it. So this is a table in English, and if you say that you want a table when you go to a place where the majority of people speak in Hindi, they won't be able to understand what you are saying. If there was a one-to-one relationship between this image or the thing that is the table and the word or the utterance table, then a person might be able to understand it irrespective of where he came from. But it is not like that, which shows that language is arbitrary. It is chosen at random. Naming process is something that is done in random or in a random manner. Hence, there is no one-to-one relationship between the thing and the sounds which is used to denote it. Hence, language is arbitrary. I hope that it was clear. Now, the eighth point is that language is a form of human behavior. A set of conventions, and like any other habit, will be acquired by the members of a linguistic community. So, it is a human behavior. Acquiring language is actually a human behavior. That is why there is, when a person is not able to utter language clearly, he might go through behavioral therapy to make him speak in a coherent manner. So, language is again a form of human behavior. It is something which is acquired, like behavior itself. It is something which is acquired. It is a set of conventions, and like any other habit, it will be acquired by the members of linguistic community. Even when we go to certain places, we speak in accordance with the context, right? Now, like I said, we always speak based on conventions. When we go to a wedding, we will be in a jovial mood and we will be speaking in a particular way. And when we go to a funeral, we will be in a sad mood and we will be speaking in a rather sad manner. So it shows that again we know how to use language according to the context. So language is a form of human behavior. It is something which is acquired. It is a set of conventions, and like any other habit, it is acquired by the members of linguistic community. Now the ninth point is that language is subject to change, and hence linguistic changes should be taken as natural linguistic phenomenon. Now, language is subject to change, and hence linguistic changes should be taken as natural linguistic phenomenon. The traditional linguists never considered the linguistic changes as of greater importance. They always considered the standard variety of language as superior, and along with that, they looked upon the great masters of the language, and they used their language in describing prescribing their set of rules. So they never took language variation into consideration or linguistic changes into consideration. But a good linguist must always observe the changes in language, because language is a natural, because all the linguistic changes should be taken as natural linguistic phenomena. It is something which is natural. Any linguistic change is natural. For example, a few years back, we wouldn't have thought about words like pandemic, virus, or sanitizers and masks to be there in our day-to-day usage or day-to-day parlance. But now it is there, right? So how did it come into being? Because of a pandemic, the whole situation was changed, and now we use these words almost regularly. Now we know what a containment zone is, what a lockdown means, what a relaxation in lockdown means. Now all these words have got a new significance to it. Like there was the word corona before. The word corona was there way before the first outbreak in Wuhan, or the first virus outbreak in Wuhan. Corona meant crown. So the word was there even in the 16th century, or even before that the word was there. But now it has got a greater significance and a greater connotation. Now even linguists, people usually learn or try to study the sudden changes in meaning. We have learned about it in our language classes, about amelioration and deterioration, etc. Right? So a few years back, positive was a very good word. You need to be positive. Be positive was a very good word. But now when you think about it, positive is not that a good word now. Now when someone says that you're corona positive, then the connotation changes. Immediately there is a panic. Or when you come to know that someone closer to you or someone living next to you has become corona positive, then you feel sad. Now the word has lost, or in some way or the other, it is used in a negative connotation. So language forever changes and new words come and go. So language is not something which is static. It is a natural phenomenon that occurs. Hence, language and linguistic changes should be studied and should be taken into consideration. And language should be taken, and any linguistic change should be taken as a natural linguistic phenomenon. Now, the last and final point is that there are principles of contrast and complementarity in language, and they are important. Now, we'll be looking at the principles of contrast and complementarity on the level of phonemes because I haven't taught you morphemes. So, the principles of contrast and complementarity is of importance when it comes to language. Now, we'll look at it from the level of phonemes, that is from a phonological level. In phonology, two sounds of language are said to be in contrastive distribution if replacing one with other in the same phonological environment results in a change of meaning. If a language is in contrastive distribution, it is considered a phoneme in that language. So, simply put, it comes like this. In a phonological environment, if you replace one sound with another, and if there is a change in meaning, then they are said to be in contrastive distribution. So, same phonological environment, you are changing just one phoneme and then there is a change in meaning, then these words are said to be in contrastive distribution. Let's take a look at it. Let's take an example for that matter. The sound per and ber can both occur in word initial positions in the words like pat and bat. Now, in pat and bat, the word per is in a phonological environment. The phonological environment here is a and t sound. See, a and t sound. So, per is not preceded by any words. There is no word before per, but there is a vowel sound after it. A sound is there, and following it there is the t sound. So, it is in the phonological environment of a vowel as well as a consonant. It is not preceded by anything, but it is followed by a vowel and a consonant. That is the phonological environment. Adinte phonological environment ayum tayuman. Similarly, in the case of bat, b is not preceded by anything. That is, there is nothing before b. But after b, there is a vowel a and there is a consonant t. So, a and t are also there in bat too. So, the words pat and bat are minimal pairs in the sense that it exists in a phonological environment of vowels of a and t. Both these words are followed by a and t, so they are minimal pairs too. Now, if you replace per with b, pat with bat, if you replace per with b, pat with bat, the name, the meaning changes. Pat means you are patting at someone. Bat is an instrument that you use, for playing cricket. So again, per and ber are in contrastive distribution, and so we can call them as phonemes. The change in phonemes changes the meaning. So, phonologically, at the level of phonemes can bring about a change of meaning in a word. So, they exist in the level of phonemes and they are in a contrastive distribution. They exist in the same phonetic environment, phonological environment, but when you change the phoneme per with ber, there is a change in meaning. So, they are said to be in contrastive distribution. I hope that it was clear. I'm sorry for the messages that are coming in and going. Now, phonemes are said to be in complementary distribution when one phone never appears in the same phonetic context as the other. So, when two variants are in complementary distribution, one can predict when each will occur because one can simply look at the environment in which the allophone is occurring. So simply put, it is like this. In the case of contrast, the phonemes existed in the same phonological environment, right? In the case of pat and bat, they existed in the same phonological environment of and t. Ideyum terindeyum adhe phonological environment-lairunnu avaru exist cheyirunathu. But in the case of complementary distribution, it is not like that. They exist in a different phonological environment. Complementary distribution is applied to phonology in which similar phones in complementary distribution are usually allophones of the same phoneme. For instance, in English, there is p and p. So, p is unaspirated and p with an h in the top is aspirated p. P and p are the allophones of the phoneme p. Now, because they are in complementary distribution, which means that they don't occur in the same phonological environment. ഒരേ phonological environment-ലല്ല ഈ phonemes exist ചെയ്യുന്നത്. പക്ഷേ അവർ തമ്മിലൊരു relation ഉണ്ട്. Aspirated perയും unaspirated perയും തമ്മിൽ. Aspirated per always occurs in the word initial position. That is, at the very onset of a word, aspirated per occurs. And especially when it is followed by a vowel sound, a stressed vowel sound, aspirated per occurs. As in pin, per is followed by e sound and it is stressed. Hence, you need to use aspirated per in the case of pin. Whereas in the case of spin, their per is not aspirated. Why is that so? Because per is not occurring in the word initial position. Though it is followed by e sound, vowel sound, but it is not in the word initial position. Hence, in spin, per is in the is unaspirated. And in any other occurrence other than the word initial occurrence, when the consonants p, b and t occurs in the word initial position followed by a stressed vowel, then they are aspirated. In any other occurrences, they are unaspirated. Example, in spin, they are unaspirated, and in sippin, also they are unaspirated. So they are not in the same phonological environment. Now, there are cases of elements in which there are some phonemes which are in complementary distribution but which may not be allophones, that is the variant varieties of the same phoneme. Allophones means they are variant varieties of the same phonemes, like the aspirated p and the unaspirated p. Now, there are some cases in which these complementary distribution occurs, but the phonemes are not allophones. An example would be the distribution of her sound and sound. Her usually occurs at the word initial position and usually occurs at the word final position. So again, there is a relationship between them. So whenever, if you take these utterances as such, her occurs only at the beginning of a syllable and occurs only at the end of a syllable. So there again, they are said to be in a complementary distribution. But they are not allophones because they are two separate phonemes. Her and are two separate phonemes. Hence, they cannot be considered as allophones or variants of the same phoneme. I hope that it was clear. If you have any doubts regarding complementary distribution, I'll be sharing another video with you so that it would be made clear. So again, moving back, in the case of language, the principles of contrast and complementarity are important because they, in a way, the contrast and complementarity, the principles of contrast and complementarity determines the meaning, or it changes the meaning. As in the case of contrast, when a phoneme is replaced by another phoneme in the same phonetic environment, there is a change of meaning. As in bin and pin, there is a change of meaning. Both start with b and p, and it is in the same phonological environment in, but there is a change of meaning. But when it comes to, so that is about contrast, and when it comes to complementarity, pin, there is aspirated p in pin and unaspirated p in spin, and they are different and they exist in two different phonological environments, but still they are connected. So the principles of contrast and complementarity are important in the level of structuralism. You will learn more about it when you learn the theories of structuralism, where you compare this element of contrast and complementarity with that of metaphor and metonymy. So that is also there when you compare them with the concepts of metaphor and metonymy in structuralism. Then there is again the element of contrast and complementarity that is there. An example would be when you say that a person lives in a hut at the level of, now we were talking about contrast and complementarity at the level of phonemes. Now at the level of words, or at the level of morphemes, then again there exists contrast or complementarity in structuralism as such. For example, you say that a hut is a hut because it is not a house, a pakka house that you might live in, and then it is not a palace or a mansion. There is a difference, right? All these are complementary. They are all houses in which people live, but each of them are different. They are contrasts. A hut is different from a house or a mansion. Similarly, pat is different from bat, because in pat the word begins with the phoneme p, and in bat the word begins with the phoneme b. So pat is different from bat. It is again we are stating about contrast and changes in meaning, and how changes and complementarity affects words and affects language. Now I hope that it was clear. If you have any doubts, you can clarify them clarify the doubts at any time. Now with that, we come to an end to the lecture on structural grammar. So another thing that you need to keep in mind is that these principles were in vogue till 1950s, and after 1950s came the phrase structure grammar, and then came transformative generative grammar, etc. So all these principles were in vogue in the 1950s. So I hope that it was clear. Again, thank you for listening. In the next lecture, we'll be dealing with morphemes. Thank you.